Today we're making stone furniture. Okay. We're gonna be left with these beautiful Michelangelo statue-esque pieces of furniture. If this says anything about how heavy the chair is gonna be, it says a lot. It's actually even better than I was expecting. And thank you to Lomi for sponsoring a portion of today's video. Hello, my name is Rachel and welcome back to TheSorryGirls. If you're new here on this channel, we do all things DIY and design, sometimes big room makeover projects, sometimes smaller DIY projects, or big DIY projects like you're gonna see today. So with that being said, let's get right into today's video. I think you've probably read the title. Today we're making stone furniture. And you might be thinking, but Rachel, I don't know how to carve into the side of a mountain, let alone a giant piece of rock. I don't know if you sound like that. I don't know why I made you sound like that, but I'm also here to tell you, yes, you could. Yes, you could if you set your mind to it. But we're not here to do that today. What my plan is, through a combination of molds and white concrete / cement, we're gonna be left with these beautiful Michelangelo statue-esque pieces of furniture. Now, I've only worked with concrete a handful of times in my life, so I'm really excited about this project, and I think we're gonna learn a lot together. And for starters, I can tell you the difference between white concrete and regular old cement / concrete, which is gray, is really just price point. So if you were to buy a pre-mixed bag of white cement, it's gonna cost you a lot more, but what you can do to bring that cost down is actually buy all the materials separately. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm gonna go head over to my local construction supplier, which I'm sure you have close to you too, and we're gonna go grab that. I'll probably also head to Home Depot on my way back, grab the last of our materials, and then let's get right into it. It's hot. I need to put these windows down. Whew. That's nice. Let's go to the store. If this says anything about how heavy the chair is gonna be, it says a lot. In today's video, you're gonna see me make a concrete chair and coffee table. When I originally started my research for this project, the plan was to make my own chair mold from scratch, but the price of materials was quickly adding up. Then I saw this video by Ben from Homemade Modder, where he used this IKEA Vago chair. I was lucky enough to find one secondhand from Facebook Marketplace, and I only spent about 20 Canadian dollars on it, so I was super excited to try out this idea. The difference between what I'm going to do and Ben's video is that he actually used a children's-sized chair with regular concrete, and I'm going to try this out with the adult-sized chair and white concrete. Because of the scale of my chair, I definitely plan to add additional support than what was originally used. Stay tuned for later on in this video where I teach you how you can actually make your own unique coffee table mold. Once my work area is prepped, it was time to prep the chair for concrete. Using Gorilla Tape, which is essentially an extra strong version of duct tape, I got mine from Home Depot. The first step is to tape up the back space of the chair, to at least where it ends at the bottom of the front of the seat. Next, I continued to tape on the opposite side so there was no adhesive showing. I then took a piece of rebar, and using this tool called a cutoff tool, I was able to cut the rebar into 4 pieces, 2 that were about 2 feet long, and 2 that were about 1 foot long. Before mixing the cement, I flipped the chair upside down and leveled the seat of the chair with some scrap wood. Then I took a leftover piece of PVC pipe that I had. I wrapped some Gorilla Tape around it until it was the same diameter as the chair's drainage hole. I'm making this chair for my backyard, so I still want it to be able to drain in case it ever rains. Okay, very good. Now that the chair is all prepped, it looks something like this. And the last step before mixing the concrete was to coat the inside of the chair with a release oil. Here, I'm just using a clear mineral oil. This one's used for cutting boards, so that it doesn't leave any stains. I really just hope it helps ease the chair out of the mold once it has cured. And I found this most easy to apply using a foam brush. And welcome to my urban backyard. Before mixing, I put on some latex gloves to protect my skin. Also, be sure to wear a mask when mixing cement. For my cement mixture, I'm using white Portland cement and 2 different aggregates. Aggregate is a term used to describe coarse to medium grain material. Aggregates are used in cement for structural fill. It's essentially a cement additive that helps strengthen the concrete. Here I am using white marble rocks as a chunky aggregate. I got these in my Home Depot landscaping section, as well as white sand that acts as a fine aggregate. For my concrete mixture, I'm using 3 parts white marble chunks to 2 parts white sand to 1 part white Portland cement. And I'm just mixing mine in a rubber bin. If you are mixing by hand, I would recommend working in small batches so you know it's well mixed. I like to mix the sand and cement powders first. The water ratio I'm using is about 1 part water. I would even err on the drier side, almost less than 1 part, because you don't want to introduce too much water into your mix. If your mixture is too wet, it will in turn weaken the cured concrete. You want to look for like a cooked oatmeal consistency, something like this. Then I started to fill my mold. Once I had filled a few inches up the back of the chair, I took the 2 pieces of 2 feet rebar that I had cut earlier and suspended them from the legs going down each side of the backrest. Before moving on, I then cut this galvanized metal mesh that I bought from Home Depot and trimmed it down to the width of the chair, leaving it long enough to creep up the backrest. I also cut a hole in the middle where the drainage pipe sits. I found using tin snips made this the most easy, and definitely wear work gloves because these edges do get sharp, but it will be okay because it'll be sandwiched between the concrete. Then I kept filling the base of the chair, testing my support mesh for size and trimmed it as necessary. Once the seat of the chair was filled up about halfway, I laid down my piece of mesh. Then I did the same process for the back legs, but with 2 shorter pieces of rebar. Here you get a better idea of how I temporarily supported it with the Gorilla tape. Another option for mixing your cement is using a drill and a mixer bit, and this gave me the confidence to mix well in larger batches. Obviously, a cement mixer would be the most ideal here, but I know we don't all have as much access to those, and a drill and a mixer bit will do just fine. If you are mixing outside, be sure to keep your mix in the shade, so the water doesn't evaporate too quickly. The slower the water evaporates, the stronger your concrete will cure. And batch by batch, I just kept filling the mold. To finish off the legs of the chair, I took some large plastic water bottles and cut off the top and bottom and then cut down the back to give me these warped plastic sheets. Repeated that 4 times for each of the legs. Then I wrapped each leg with a plastic sheet, securing the sides with more Gorilla tape. Before filling any more concrete, I took a mouse sander and tried to vibrate any air bubbles. You can also use a hammer to do this and just tap the sides of your mold. Then I was ready to fill the rest of the chair until it looked something like this. While this cured, I used a tarp to keep in some of the moisture and protect the chair. I let my chair cure for about a week, but you definitely want to let it sit for a few days. And that was it for today. Tomorrow I'll be heading to the office to start my stone-inspired coffee table.
Cut the canvas!
Okay, it's time to start making the coffee table, and my idea for this coffee table was sparked by seeing images like these on Pinterest. I really love the sort of stone, oblong, organic shapes that they have, and I'm really excited to try and mimic this with the concrete. Now, I also want to tell you why concrete is such a great resource. Not only is it so widely used, especially in areas like construction, but it's long-lasting, extremely durable, and can be repaired, also is completely recyclable. Recycled concrete is used in many of the same ways that new materials are, such as paving, gravel, and aggregates. But obviously you're gonna need an industrial sized crusher to break down the concrete, but it is really cool that it can be broken down and completely made into something new. Speaking of recycling, this brings me to the sponsor of today's video, Luxe. We all know the negative impacts of food waste going to the landfill. It produces methane gas, which is actually worse than CO2. What Luxe is, it's an appliance for your home that takes your food scraps, any sort of food waste, and breaks it down into a nutrient-rich soil. Composting in certain environments, especially if you're living in a city or in a country with exceptionally cold winters, can be challenging. Here at TSG, we have a big team working here in the office, and sometimes we have quite a bit of food waste. Since we needed an odorless solution that would also not take up a lot of space, we decided to try Lomi. Lomi is super easy to use, it has a chic design, it's climate neutral, and it even breaks down Lomi approved bioplastics. Now, I'm gonna go throw the rest of my food, well actually, that strawberry was not gonna go, but a little bit of my avocado was hard, so I'm gonna go put that in our Lomi, and then let's go make a table mold. Bye. To make the tabletop mold, I started off by using a large sheet of melamine board. I then traced out a sort of oblong shape that I was happy with, something that looks like this, but I encourage you to play around with this step. Now that I have my cut line, I secured the piece to the table and used a jigsaw to slowly cut out the tabletop shape, turning and securing the piece of melamine as I went. Then I just sanded the edges nice and smooth till the final piece looks something like this. To build up the size of the mold, I chose to use this stuff called vinyl base wall cove. I found mine at Home Depot. It was pretty inexpensive. Then using some construction adhesive and a staple gun, I attached the vinyl base cove to the edge of the melamine shape. The staples helped hold it onto the vinyl as the construction adhesive dried. Then you're left with something like this. To finish the tabletop mold, I wanted to fill the seam where the vinyl meets the melamine. To do this, I first used this stuff called finishing paste wax. I rubbed it close to the corner, but not fully into the corner on each side. This is necessary for later.
This stuff smells so good. It smells like a pool. But like the pool's like at a hotel where it's like just rammed with chlorine.
The next step was to take a wooden ball and cover it in the finishing paste wax. Then using silicone from a caulking tube, color doesn't matter, I placed a thick bead into the corner of the mold. If I were to do this again, I definitely would have used even more silicone at this step. The idea here is to push the wooden ball into the corner of the mold hard enough that the excess pools on either side. I've seen this also be done with a ball tool typically used in cake decorating, but I thought this wooden ball would do just fine. Let this fully dry, and what you do later is pull away the excess silicone so that only the inner corner of the mold is sealed. To clean up any excess silicone, it rubs away nicely just using rubbing alcohol, and this is how it looks. Moving on to the leg mold for the coffee table, I used two different sizes of builder's tube, one that was 12-inch diameter and one that was 8-inch diameter. The idea here is that the smaller tube will sit inside the larger tube so that the legs are hollow and not just a giant rock of concrete. So I cut down my builder's tube to 16 inches in height. I just left a little extra room here, but I only plan to fill them up about 12 inches. To cut the builder's tube, I used a circular saw. First I made a plunge cut, and then I had Rachael slowly and very carefully roll the tube towards me. You can also just use a regular handsaw here, it doesn't have to be perfect. Next, I took another piece of melamine and placed the leg on the surface. I made sure to have the factory edge that is a perfect straight cut perpendicular to the melamine. Then using the same Gorilla Tape from before, I secured the builder's tube to the melamine using small pieces at a time and repeated that with the second leg until you had something that looks like this. Before inserting the smaller tube, I coated the outside with the same finishing wax from before. Builder's tube typically has a coating on the inside that helps it release from the cement. But because our concrete will be touching the outside of this tube, I wanted to use the wax as a precautionary step. Next, again, putting the factory edge to the melamine, I secured it with more small pieces of tape, this time on the inside of the builder's tube. I did that for both legs, and that was it for the coffee table molds. The next day, I was ready to mix some more concrete, but before that, I did a final layer over my whole mold with the finishing paste wax. I wanted to try something different than the mineral oil that we had used with the chair earlier. You guys know the drill by now, 3 parts rocks to 2 parts sand to 1 part Portland cement. Mix well.
Oh, it's gonna be so heavy. Oh, it's gonna be so heavy.
What is his personality today?
My lovely partner Steph. Who's in Texas all week.
First, I made sure my table was level and batch by batch started to fill the mold. This time I made sure I was tapping the mold as I went to remove most of the air bubbles. Once my mold was filled up about halfway, I again cut down some rebar with my cutoff tool to act as support for a tabletop. Here I went with 3 pieces of rebar, cut to various sizes depending where they landed in the mold. Here you see Rachael and I chasing the shade again. Remember, you don't want to mix in direct sun. Also, if it is really hot outside, you can actually add ice water. That will help the water evaporate slower. And just keep filling that mold. I purposely didn't fill our mold all the way because I wanted our tabletop to be about 3.5 inches tall. Lastly, I made a big batch to fill the table legs. Oatmeal looking delicious. Perfect. To fill the table legs, I used my hand and a trowel as a guide to get it between the builder's tube. I used a scrap piece of wood here to help push down the concrete to fill in any gaps. As well as just using my hands, I would bang the sides of the mold to reduce any air pockets. Lastly, I just smoothed out the top of the cement with another scrap piece of wood and used a measuring tape to make sure that both legs were filled to a consistent height. I covered both our tabletop and the legs with another tarp and let those sit to cure for a few days.
Okay, so both projects have been poured. It's time to unmold. I'm actually a week and a half out of these projects, but I thought it'd be nice to sit down, have a little chat, and I'll catch you up to speed. So let's start with the tabletop. To unmold the tabletop, it was actually super easy. All we had to do was, I had Rachael help me, and we carefully just flipped it onto a soft surface. Woo! Yes! It's beautiful. I am so happy with the finished project. I think the tabletop just looks like this gorgeous rock was sliced into medallions and we were left with this beautiful slab of stone. The kind of like geode formations that happened where the concrete didn't meet the vinyl siding. The imperfections is what makes it so perfect in my eyes. This is because of the aggregate that we put in it. If I spent a lot more time tapping and vibrating the sides, we could have had less of those, but I'm really happy that they're actually there. The tabletop, it looks good. To unmold the legs, all you really have to do is just take apart the builder's tube. Unfortunately, it wasn't reusable, but I'm really happy that at least the mold for the top was. To separate it from the melamine board, all I did was turn it on its side and just gave them a good tap with a hammer and they broke off. But yeah, even the legs had this lovely texture to them. I'm really happy with how they turned out. So I purposefully did not attach the legs to the tabletop itself for a couple reasons, but the main one being, if I ever did want to move it in the future, I didn't want the weight of the legs to be relying on the top of the coffee table. This way it also is actually a lot more easier for just like 2 people like Rachael and I to move it around ourselves. I can pick up a leg by myself. We can pick up the tabletop together just between the 2 of us. It's not crazy heavy. It obviously is very heavy, so I'm not concerned if you did bump the table. It's not moving. It can stay. It's structurally sound. But I do like having the option to easily move it around. The last few steps to finish up the coffee table was just going in with some sandpaper on a sanding block and just cleaned up the edges a little bit. I also went in with a concrete sealant. I found applying it with this foam roller is actually really good for getting it in any like nooks and crannies. I could really push in the sealant. Oh. Oh my god. Don't worry about the sealant though, it is colorless and it actually added a little bit of sheen to my table, which I'm okay with. I'm sure there are more matte ones that exist out there if you did want to opt for that kind of option. Concrete sealer is great because it helps protect it from spills, but it also helps protect it from UV rays. Now, let's take a closer look at the coffee table style. Now let's talk about the chair. The chair is great, by the way. I love her. I absolutely cannot move her on my own. I can't move her with one other person. She is about probably 200 pounds. So the real challenge here was getting the chair into its intended spot in my backyard, as well as flipped right side over to be unmolded. But I hear if you invite your friends over on a Friday night and you talk about the project you're really excited about and you offer them maybe a beer or something of a bubbly variety, they're happy to help you move your project.
Cheers, 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 cheers.
Yeah. After the chair was moved, thank you to my friends. Love you guys. It was actually really smooth sailing after this. I think because I didn't fill up the legs the whole way, I actually left like 1.5 inches at the base of each leg. The chair essentially just, because of the weight, obviously, it like unmolded itself. And I think the release oil that we used played a big part in easing that process. So all I really had to do was just wiggle it out and it slipped right out and it's beautiful. Oh, I was so happy. Oh, I was just so happy when the chair unmolded. I think it looks amazing. Even more so than the tabletop. It has all this amazing texture and just, Okay. I love how this turned out. It's actually even better than I was expecting. Again, if you don't like this kind of texture, I would just opt for a sand mix. And another thing I was super happy about, similar to the coffee table, the mold is completely reusable. Similar to the coffee table, all that there was left to do now was just sand the edges a little bit and give it its final clear coat of the sealant. And now that it's all finished, I've styled the chair and let's take a closer look. Overall, I am obviously very pleased with how these projects turned out. If I were to do this again, I think it would be fun to explore a route where I made the concrete lighter somehow. In my research, I did run into some blogs that said that you could add styrofoam to your concrete mix, like the styrofoam beads, for example, which I do find really interesting. I had so much fun working with concrete as a medium. I think I definitely learned a lot and I hope you guys got some good takeaways as well. I'm really proud of these projects and I'm super curious to know what you guys think, so let me know in the comments down below. Is this something you try? I don't know what else to say, but thank you. Thank you for watching today's video. It means a lot to me and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.
If you enjoyed today's video, check out this one where I used my own personal spin to recreate and reinvent old TheSorryGirls DIYs.
Oh, they're so baby.
And then like this is how you can stand it. The most professional.
Was that even insightful whatsoever? Using a drill is like riding a bike.